Brilliant. Okay, so welcome everybody. Oh no, it's doing a live transcript of me. That's awful. I'm going to minimize that. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Oh no, now we've got people appearing. Okay, maybe we should pause a couple of seconds then. Hi, Ollie. Thank you for joining us. I'm just going to change the settings of the meeting, I think, before we get going, so that we're not interrupted by the lobby. One second. Okay, excellent. Now we're ready to go. Rosa, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you to everyone who's joined us as well. I know that this is going to be watched by loads and loads of students as it gets sent out. So we're running this session today, which is called Have You Ever Considered Oxbridge? And all of you have very kindly joined us tonight because students, you are what we consider to be really great potential applicants to Oxbridge, and we're going to explain a little bit more about that, what I mean by that in a bit. But essentially, you are our highest attaining cohort of year 11. You're the students who are set to get amazing grades consistently across your subjects based on your targeted grades and your mock exams. And so one of the things, the brilliant things that comes with that is that you should consider applying to some of the most competitive universities, not just in the UK, but in the world. And as part of that today, we're going to be talking about Oxford and Cambridge. And I'm really delighted that we've been joined by Rosa. Rosa is a former student of the John Roan who was at Somerville College, Oxford. I'm going to introduce her properly in a bit. And we're just going to kind of have a chat about what going to Oxford and Cambridge is like and what you can expect. So very much welcome. Just to remind you that this is the first of 3 events. So today we're just going to be talking, Rosa and I are going to be having an informal chat. And then on Monday at 6 o'clock, we have another virtual event, but with the admissions officers from our partner colleges. That's Mansfield College, Oxford, and Gonville College, Gonville and Keys College, Cambridge. And they're going to be hosting a joint presentation. And that's going to be really important, straight from the horse's mouth. What are they expecting from students? What kind of applicants do they want? And how can you best prepare yourself for that? So without further ado, what do we mean by Oxbridge? Well, it's an amalgamation of the universities of Oxford and Cambridge, and they are the 2 highest ranking universities in the UK, and they're also in the top 10 universities in the world. So Oxford actually ranks at the moment from the Times Higher Education Supplement as the best university in the world, better than some American universities you might have heard of, like Harvard, which is where Barack Obama went, and Stanford. At the moment, the University of Cambridge is ranked 5th, but usually it hovers anywhere between 2nd, 3rd, and 5th. I've actually never seen it at 5th before. With all of these things, you never know quite what the metrics are for deciding this, but you can be safely assured that they are the top 5 universities in the world. And there's a lovely picture at the bottom there, on the left. I mean, Rosie will be able to talk about this more, but that is the Bodleian. What is the Bodleian actually? What function does it have?
It's a library.
A library, a very famous, it's always that iconic image of Oxford University. And then you've got on the right the picture of the beautiful River Cam outside King's College, Cambridge as well. So Oxbridge is an amalgamation of the universities of Oxford and Cambridge. Now, why, would you even bother consider an application? Apart from them being very, very beautiful, which you've just seen, why would you bother with an application at all? Well, some key reasons. They set, there's a typo here, sorry, but they set the standard for academic excellence. So anywhere you go in the world, the best of academia really comes from these 2 universities, first of all. Secondly, you go into Oxford or Cambridge, you would have the the opportunity to be taught by the finest academics in the world. So if you really are passionate about maths, there's nothing better than going and being taught by people who are the best, you know, the best mathematicians and academics in the world. If you have a passion for history, how wonderful it is to be taught by the people who are writing the books that you are reading. So it's an opportunity to be taught by wonderful, wonderful academics. There's also a benefit of being around other brilliant students who can push you and who you'll be in touch with for the rest of your lives. There are amazing extracurricular activities on offer, and we'll talk about this a bit more, but one of the benefits of going to somewhere like Oxford and Cambridge is because they're so historic, there's quite a lot of money, and it means that there's loads of extracurricular activities on offer as well. So whether you're interested in wine tasting or Quidditch, there will probably be something for everybody. And finally, it goes without saying that having a degree from one of the best universities in the world comes with amazing job and postgraduate opportunities. So I went to Cambridge on a day trip in October, and I was incredibly flattered that someone came up to me on the street and offered me a job in management consultancy, which is the sort of typical sort of corporate route that happens. So I was very flattered that someone thought I was young enough to be a student there. But my point is that there are people on the street hoping to run into students from Oxford and Cambridge to offer you jobs. And if you want to go into postgraduate academia after that, so if your interest is in going and doing a master's degree or a PhD and exploring your subject even further, well, what a great foundation to have. And finally, just to wrap up sort of my section, I'm going to talk about key dates in a second, but what do you need to get? You need to achieve at least A star, A, or some courses say AAA at A level, but you should be really aiming for that A star, A, or even 3 A stars at A level. You need to have achieved consistently at GCSE. The GCSEs are less important now than they have been in the past. For applications to Oxford and Cambridge, but what they are really looking for is the discipline of someone who has managed to achieve across all subjects, whether or not they are your favourites. And then once you've got all that, you have about a 1 in 6 chance of being successful. I think that's if you are called to interview, and that's between 1 in 5 and 1 in 6. So for every place, there are about 6 people applying who also have brilliant grades and who are also doing all of those extracurricular things that will help you with your application. So it is competitive. But my take on it always has been, whether or not you get in, what an enjoyable process it is applying anyway and going through the process. I was applied and was pulled to Cambridge, which is where you get into the university. They think you're good enough to get into the university, but you didn't have a place for you at the college. But regardless of what happened, I loved the process of writing all of the essays and the application process itself. I think it taught me a great deal. So in terms of admissions, it's a competitive process, and it means that you have to start a bit sooner than other students who are at sixth form. So in about February of your year 12, so next year, there will be openings for scholarships. Now, these scholarships don't affect the grades that you have to get. It used to be the case 50 years ago where if you were a very, very good sportsman, you could be offered a sports scholarship and maybe you could get into the university with less grades. Not true anymore. You still need to get the grades, but perhaps if you're a musician, you might like to apply for a music scholarship. From about June, we start choosing your course, to be honest, as soon as you get into year 12, but we start the process of writing your personal statement at the end of May and throughout June. Our year 12 students at the moment are now finalising their personal statements, which is the sort of 600-word version of you that you send to the universities and what they judge you on. And you then have to use August to register for any entrance exams, so a test centre near you. So there are very standardised examinations if you're applying for maths and sciences, and there are more essay-based examinations if you're applying for humanities. And then this is the key bit, where everyone else has the opportunity of thinking about their application and using that first term of year 13 to sort things out. Students who want to apply to Oxford and Cambridge don't have that opportunity. You have to put your application in, finalise with your personal statement, any work experience, all in by the 15th of October. which is brilliant because then it means you can use the rest of the year to really concentrate on the rest of the process. You'll hear back in about November or December whether you've been invited to interview. That will take place in December, and then your final decisions and outcomes are heard about in January, so you know where you stand at that point. Now, I think it used to be the case that many schools, especially state schools, were of the mindset that you should just kind of have a go at applying to Oxford or Cambridge, and you had the grades and you were good enough. And I certainly really don't agree with that on principle. I think it's really important that students are as prepared as they could possibly be for that admissions process. So from year 12, we have an after-school competitive admissions pathway where we meet once a week and we debate and we talk about areas of the curriculum that are beyond what you'd learn about in school. So for instance, we've done sessions on animal rights, on the differences between sex and gender. We've done sessions on an introduction to classical mythology because it's often something that comes up more than you'd expect. But really broad areas that you wouldn't expect to cover in your normal subjects, we try to cover those in our additional after-school sessions. And then as you progress through year 12, that becomes more honed and it becomes interview practice, getting you ready for any entrance exams, thinking about that body of written portfolio you might have to apply with. So it becomes more specialised as you go through year 12. Right. Enough from me. I'm really delighted to introduce you to Rosa. Rosa is a former student of the John Roan and a graduate of Somerville College, Oxford. Studied English language and literature between 2014 and 2017. And amazingly, you decided that you were going to give all of that up and switch to being a coder 2 years ago, and you're now a software developer at the Financial Times. So over to you, Rosa. I don't know if you want to sort of flesh that out a bit and what your process was, why you chose the course maybe that you wanted to choose, and how your career has developed since then.
Yeah, so I chose English just because I'd always really liked it, and also it was a strong subject for me. The A-levels I'd chosen also matched applying for that. So that was a factor as well. Yeah, but I think mainly it was just like I was really, really passionate about it, and it was really easy to go into the interview process knowing that I had a lot to talk about outside what I'd learned just in school, because I'd done so much like reading outside of that as well. In terms of like how my career has developed since then, yeah, I wasn't really thinking like necessarily like careers focused, I think, when I chose the course. And I think the reason for switching to coding is, yeah, that I wasn't particularly interested in any of the careers you can do with an English degree. Like I don't actually really like writing that much. I just like reading. So yeah, that's the reason for that.
Great, and you mentioned that you did a suite of subjects. What were your A-level subjects?
So I did English, French, and history for A-level, and then I did government and politics for AS. So I'm a former student of Mr. Wilson as well.
That's a really interesting point to bring up, because it used to be the case, I'm going to labour this point, it used to be the case that the Universities of Oxford and Cambridge would be quite fussy about the subjects you took at A-level. And they would have a list of what they called the facilitating subjects, and you had to pick of those subjects. And those were maths, English, the 3 sciences, languages, history and geography, essentially. And if you wanted to do something like politics or psychology, if you wanted to apply to Oxford and Cambridge, you wouldn't be able to take that, or it would rule you out. Now, the Universities of Oxford and Cambridge have scrapped that list completely, but the statistics that come out of the students you get in would suggest that there is some kind of bias still there between the subjects. So it would be recommended, if you would like to apply to Oxford and Cambridge, that you take at least 2 of the facilitating subjects. So, for example, history, geography, and then something like politics, which is a newer subject. So those secondary subjects, or they used to be non-facilitating subjects, are things like politics, psychology, sociology, business. So keep it within a 2-to-1 ratio, and unfortunately would rule out or really, really suggest not taking any BTEC or vocational qualifications at level 3 if you would like to put in an application to Oxford or Cambridge. So that's one thing to consider already. How can you make your A-level subjects as academic and as strong as possible? So Rosa, you were obviously lucky enough to apply. I don't know, how much preparation did you get when you were making that application or help with school? Did you just sort of go for it?
No, I got a lot of support from the school. So my English teacher at the time, Mr. Gunningham, ran a bunch of mock interviews with me. And I think I was going to touch on this later anyway, but I think like that was really, really helpful because the interviews are in a very specific format where you can't exactly prepare for the questions they're going to ask you, but you can get yourself used to the format. So when you go in, you're as comfortable with that as possible and you can like just focus on what they're asking you, if that makes sense. So that part was really, really useful. Also, before we get to that point, like doing as many drafts of your personal statement as possible is like, yeah, something I'd really recommend, like getting feedback, as much feedback as you can from your teachers on that. Yeah, and then there's a lot of resources online for a lot of the subjects that you apply for. You have to do a exam before you get to the interview stage. So like for law, it's the LSAT. For English, it's the ELAT. And there's a lot of resources online which can help you with that. So once again, you can just like practice the format and like get used to them, even if you don't necessarily have anyone grading them. Like it's still useful getting yourself used to the format, I'd say.
Absolutely. So you put in your application, you'd obviously done lots of reading around your subject, you'd written this beautiful personal statement, you thought about an entrance exam. So then you were called back to interview. And what is that? Because it doesn't really happen at that many other universities actually where you're actually interviewed. So what does that look like and what can our students expect?
Nice. So I'm actually gonna briefly rewind before I explain about the interview stages, just to explain a little bit more about the collegiate system, which is something that Ms. Porter mentioned earlier. So Oxford and Cambridge differs from other universities in another way, which is you don't apply to Oxford, you apply to a college. So I applied to Somerville College. You can imagine it like all of the students which are at Oxford University are divided between like 39 colleges, which are like spread out over the city. So like each college has like its own building, like its own little grounds, and it's basically where you like eat, sleep, and study. So like there isn't actually a centralized campus. Like you have like this little area which is just your college building. I'm just explaining that now because it's useful context for when like I go on to explain other stuff. So I hope that made sense. Yeah, so the interview stages and what to expect. You're usually going to be looking at 2 interviews per subject. They're going to be with the tutors that would actually be teaching you if you got in. There's probably going to be like 2 or 3 of them. And the interviews are going to last like 20 minutes each normally. So like the interview day is, when I did it, it was kind of whole experience in itself where I got to go and like stay in the college accommodation and like I got to like eat in the hall and like kind of get a real sense of like what it was like if I actually went to the university. With you at the moment, they're still doing like online interviews, like definitely this year. I don't know what they're going to be doing next year, so I'm not sure whether you guys will get the same experience. Online, I can imagine even being better in some ways because like you're in your own environment and it might actually make you more comfortable. So like I don't think you'd be at a disadvantage if like it worked out that way, but it is kind of fun going and staying in college. Yeah, in terms of like the content of the interviews, like it's really not about like what you know, it's about kind of how you think and your passion for your subject. So like when I was like looking up stuff before this presentation, one example question I saw for people applying for a music degree was, if you could design a musical instrument, what would it be and what sound would it make? So like, it's like really not necessarily the kind of stuff you can like revise for. It's more like they'll ask you a question and then you'll like have like an interesting conversation with the tutor about it. And yeah, so subjects like vary quite a lot, but like quite a common format of the interview is them to give you like a prompt. So it might be like a case study or a graph or like an extract from a book or something, depending on what subject you're applying for. And you get like 45 minutes alone with it. And there'll be some prompt questions at the bottom and you can kind of like annotate it and like get some thoughts together about it. And then you go in and kind of discuss it with the tutors for the first half of the interview, and then the second half is like them asking questions about like your personal statement and like why you want to apply and that kind of thing. Definitely look up online because it varies slightly depending on what subject you apply for, but like that's generally the format of like most of them. I'd say like advice for during the interview is just like stay calm, like the tutor's just a person, you're just having a conversation, like they're really not trying to catch you out, like they're just trying to have like a discussion with you, and most of the time there's not like a wrong answer. If you start going like slightly down the wrong path, like they'll try and like guide you back to like what like they actually think you should be talking about. So like they really want you to do as well as you possibly can, like that. And if you go in kind of knowing that, I think it makes it a bit of a calmer experience. Yeah, and in terms of preparation, you can do before, just like know your personal statement inside and out, because they're going to print it off a copy of it, they're going to have it in front of them, they're going to be like scanning it and like picking up random bits that like they want to ask you about in more detail. So just be really, really prepared to like speak eloquently about any part of it, basically, which you can just do by practice and reading it over and over again. Yeah, also like read the news. There might have been like some crazy scientific breakthrough in the subject that you're applying for, which they could like ask you about. So like it's useful to know about that if that's the case. Or like particularly if you're applying for something like politics, obviously being up to date with current affairs is like a prerequisite. Yeah, practice the interview format as I touched on earlier. Just make sure you look up as much information as you can about what it's going to be online, and then try and do some run throughs with your like subject teacher. And yeah, just like make use of like all of the online resources. They have like practice questions. Yeah, they have like, yeah, practice prompts. Just, yeah, I think that's my biggest advice.
It's really interesting that you do all of this preparation work and you work so hard and you read so many books and you produce this beautiful personal statement that you want to talk about, and then they could ask you a question like, if you had to, and it seems kind of weird and tenuous, but I want to labour that point that when you get to that stage, they are not looking for someone who just knows the answer and says, because what they're really doing is saying, can I teach this person for the next 3 years? Is it going to be interesting? And are they open to being developed? And if you walk into an interview and say, no, I know all the answers and there's nothing you can say to change my opinion, well, you're not going to learn very much from the experience, are you? So they're looking about how you think and how you make connections and what conclusions you lead to. Okay, I'm just conscious that we've got we've got a good amount of time, but I don't want us to run over or for it to take too long. So let's move on. So you go to the interview, you get in, fantastic. Now, what's it like?
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, it can be quite intense. So like there's like 8-week terms. So the workload, which is like shorter than other universities. So like the workload is kind of like crammed into a smaller space, so it can feel like more intense at times, but you get like a lot of support. You get support from your tutors, you get support from your friends that you make there. Like there's like a university like counseling service if you ever start feeling quite overwhelmed. Like people are very receptive to that kind of thing. And yeah, the number of contact hours varies a lot depending on your subject, is I think one thing that really surprised me when I got there. So as like a humanities student, like you really only have like couple of like tutorials a week and like one essay that you then just have to write, which is obviously super different from school. And I think it's really an exercise into getting into like good habits about like managing your own time and meeting deadlines off your own back, and like prioritizing your workload and that kind of thing. Like I think that was like one of the biggest differences for me.
Wow. And yeah, so that contact hour thing is, so going from being at school where you have, 6 hours of lessons a day or whatever, to suddenly being, oh, you've got 2 hours of time with somebody and the rest of your time is completely independent. Was that, I don't know, were you really bad at it at the beginning? Is it something that you got better at over time?
I actually don't know if I got better at it over time. I did like a lot of all-nighters, because like the libraries are 24 hours, so I did a lot of like staying up all night to write essays and stuff. But no, I think I did actually get better by the end. I think it felt like a really big change at the beginning, but it kind of forces you to get into those good habits, because you just like want to have like a nice life where you get to do like fun things, and the easiest way to facilitate that is just by like working during the day as opposed to like looking at random stuff on YouTube, like.
Of course, yeah, the eternal quest to procrastinate. Okay, brilliant. And in terms of your life, a day in the life, so life at Oxbridge, you have your tutorials, you'll go away and do lots of reading in the library, you have to manage your own time, you're producing a lot of work in really short spaces of time, and you're discussing that work. But what does a natural day in the life, like outside of the studying, is it fun?
Yeah, it's really fun. It's honestly like Oxford is like a really beautiful city. So is Cambridge as well. I think Oxford has a little bit more going on, but maybe I'm biased. Yeah, so the two pictures on this slide are actually my college. So that's Somerville. So the bottom one, the big like green bit is like the grounds. We also call it the quad. And in summer, there'll be like a bunch of people staying on there, kind of having picnics and stuff. Then the big building in the background of the picture is the library. So like you might like do a bit of like work in the day and then like come out and like chill on the quad for a while with your friends and then go to a tutorial if you have one like scheduled that day. The picture above the top one is the dining hall. So they serve like breakfast, lunch and dinner. It's generally pretty good. Different colleges have like different reputations for having like high quality food. There's like one in particular that is meant to have like really, really good food, but I can't remember which one it is. But like some of it is like pretty good, I would say. But yeah, so your days are probably some combination of like going to like different libraries and then like doing something like fun with your friends in the evening in the city. And yeah, your college will run, particularly at the beginning when you first get there, they kind of run a lot of events to like help you get to know people. So like they have these like parties called like bops, where they're always themed and you like dress up. And then like there are like sports teams in the colleges, and there's like one college or like two colleges where they do like a tortoise race. Like every year they each have their own tortoise and they like race it. There's like loads of like random stuff going on all the time. It feels quite like busy and random and fun, basically.
Amazing. And I was just about to ask you that because obviously going to Oxford or Cambridge, it kind of has a reputation of having a terrible nightlife. But is that true?
Yeah, I would say like I had a really good time there. Like going out quite a lot. Like I think it has most of the normal stuff that you would expect from a university. So like it has like clubs, like they're pretty small, but the music is actually pretty good, and you tend to be able to like walk home from them at the end of the night rather than having to get like 2 night buses like you do in London, which is quite nice. And then like on top of this kind of normal stuff, it has like this unusual thing. So they have like balls. Like every summer, like a bunch of colleges like host balls, so everyone goes like decked out in like their fancy dresses and like their suits and stuff like that. And then they have like this annual like rowing tournament where like you sit on like the banks of the river and you like watch people row and drink pims. And then like they have this big party called Queer Fest, which is like LGBTQIA plus, hosted by one of the colleges, and it's kind of like a big like festival with drag queens. And yeah, there's like lots of stuff that's like unique to the place, which I think just makes it, yeah, like makes it really, really fun. There's lots of stuff in the calendar, which is really fun.
I'm so sorry for that tannoy interruption. I have to say, it went on for quite a while after I muted myself, so I didn't hear much of what you said there. But buzzing with life, which leads on nicely to kind of extracurricular. We've kind of touched on this a bit, but I think if you are a sports person, or you're a musician, or you love theatre, or you're a debater, there are just so many amazing activities to get involved in. So over to you, Rosa.
Yeah, exactly. What Ms. Porter said, like kind of no matter what you want to do, you'll probably be able to like find a society for it. And it like depending on what you want to get out of it, because like you can just do like random fun stuff, like Quidditch is genuinely a thing if that's like what you're into. Or like you can do like sports to like quite a high level, or if you're more interested in like building your career, there's like societies which do that. So like yeah, you can, some examples that I wrote down of stuff you can do are like you get into like student journalism. You can like do a thing where you run for a kind of democratic office in your college or like in the uni as a whole. You can do like charity work. You can run a college film club, which is what my friend did. You can be in a play written and directed by students, and like drama at Oxford is to like a really high level. Like so many kind of famous actors and actresses like went there and like launched their career off the back of it. Yeah, you can do like cheerleading. You can like I don't know. There's just like loads and loads of stuff.
Sounds amazing. And yeah, there's I mean, we don't have Jacob here because he would have talked about Cambridge extracurricular as well, but another former student of ours, but there's a very famous organisation called the Cambridge Footlights, which is where loads of comedian and actors go and still go. So it's not just about it being an extra to the university. You're actually, you know, doing things at a very high level, and lots of people go on to make careers out of the extracurricular they did at university. Okay, and then on to job and employment opportunities. So how did you find the service when you were there?
Yeah, you're just like so supported, and there's so many opportunities. And I'd say there's like heaps of employment opportunities like while you're at the university and then also after you leave it. So there's something called the Oxford Careers Service, which is just entirely set up for this basically. And they're literally available for like your whole life, as in like I'm 26 and one of my friends rang them, who was at uni with me at the same time as me, and she rang them the other day being like, I'm kind of thinking about law, can you help me with that? And yeah, it's a really, really good service. And then there are just like heaps of like careers events where like employers kind of come up trying to talk to you about like working at their company. So like they put on like quick fancy dinners sometimes and like invite people from a specific subject to the dinner, and then you get like free food, and then they just like talk to you about like what it's like to work for their company. They give out, there are like careers fairs where they will have stands and you can go and you get a bunch of free stuff, and then like you can get your name to like various companies if you want to work for them. The university helps organize a lot of internships in the holidays, which you have a lot of time for because the holidays are much longer. And I'd say internships are like a very good way to kind of like try out a few things and like figure out what you want to do, rather than like waiting till like after you leave uni and then like, I don't know, not being sure and being a bit like pressed for money and stuff. Like it's very easy to like try out a few things, and like there's really like the resources and like the opportunities to do that. So yeah, it's good.
Amazing. I heard this amazing story from someone who's, I don't know if you can verify this, who said that MI5 used to do some recruitment, and you would get like an anonymous note in your pigeonhole basically saying turn up at this point at this time, don't tell anybody or something, and then you'd meet people from Secret Service essentially.
No, exactly. And actually, I know the subjects that you have to do to get that note. It's basically like if you're doing like dual languages, and they're like languages which like less people in the UK are likely to know, then you'll like, I know a bunch of people that have got contacted by MI5. So I think like, yeah, Arabic is one of them, and I think possibly Mandarin as well. Like if you did like those two, yeah, I think you're in with a good shot.
Exciting stuff. Okay, so that's a little bit about what the experience would be like. So you put your application together, and that application is only, you know, your personal statement is only 600 words, but in those 600 words goes a huge amount of research and additional reading and things that you've done that can show these admissions tutors how much you love your subject and want to study it and why you deserve a place. You then get called to an interview, 2 interviews in the day, where you talk about your passion for the subject and they see how you think. You'll probably have to sit an entrance exam and submit some a body of work as well to them to look at. And then if you're lucky enough to go, you'll experience these amazing facilities, incredible extracurricular, it looks like amazing dinners as well, in these beautiful settings, but within these very cramped weeks, intense weeks. I remember going to university to visit a friend of mine, going to Oxford to visit a friend of mine, and we went to a Halloween party. And the next morning, there were people in the library still in their Halloween costumes working. So they hadn't even gone home and rested. They'd gone straight to the library the next morning and worked. So it is really intense. These 8-week terms are so intense. But then the employment opportunities and everything that comes with that, and the learning experience is fantastic. So I guess the next part of this presentation really is about thinking about what you can do as students and what parents can do to support students who think this might be something that appeals to them, this application process. And really this Year 11 summer, even though I'm sure it's at the back of all of our Year 11 minds at the moment to think about the next stage, it's the best thing you can do is really come back in September, not having, you know, written your personal statement already. We'd never ask you to do that, but really having done some research into the type of subjects that you'd like to study, maybe thinking about signing up to an open day to go and have a look, and really exploring your interest in your subject. So, for example, if you really want to study history or history and politics, really doing some extra reading around your subject, doing lots of research, listening to loads of podcasts as well. And we have lots of teachers who are, you know, huge subject specialists in our school. And so use your teachers as well. If you can't decide on a subject, if you're torn between maybe studying geography and studying a language, go and speak to those teachers and find out what a university degree would be like. Hear it from them. But yeah, all the advice is just to read, do lots of research, podcasts, use your teachers. Rosa, I don't think if you have any other avenues of advice there as well.
Yeah, I would say like just try and start kind of collecting evidence for ways in which you could be like passionate about your subject, like outside of like just like your, yeah, just outside like your A levels or whatever. That's like a massive one, because yeah, anything that you can do to convey that it's like something that you would like put a lot of like time and energy into is going to be like really helpful. So like Miss Butter said, like podcasts, like events that you can attend, if there's any way that you can get some like work experience in a relevant field, like that looks like really good as well. Like it's not necessary, but it's kind of about giving yourself like not just a good shot but like a great shot. Yeah, just like collecting as much evidence as you can, because it's all kind of going to help.
Yeah, I have a student in our current year 12 who's applying to Oxford who you know, wants to do history and politics, and therefore has got involved in the local Labour Party and is trying to do work experience there, and has also done an EPQ, which is an extended project qualification on global political conflict. So something that you wouldn't study in school necessarily as part of your curriculum, but something that she's prepared to research outside. And so all of that conveys someone who's really dedicated to studying that subject at university. So yeah, that's really great advice. So think about what you could do over the summer holiday, and it doesn't have to be picking up, you know, if you actually go onto the Oxford and Cambridge websites, and we'll talk a little bit more about this on Monday with the admissions officers, there's lots of reading lists, and often the reading list can be really intense. And I remember, you know, those first year reading lists for history, for example, could be quite philosophical and really big books to read. So don't necessarily worry about doing that at the moment. Don't be scared by reading lists. Just start by listening to podcasts or reading your own material or reading articles or magazines, you know, things that genuinely inspire you and spark your interest, rather than feeling like you have to read Dostoevsky or something, you know, because it's the thing to read. I wouldn't approach it like that at all. One thing I wanted to flag also is something that launches this year, or that takes entries this year, which is the Cambridge Foundation route. And this is for students who are eligible across a group of different criteria, and that's to do with students that would be disadvantaged from the application process otherwise. So thinking about if you have moved homes multiple times and that's affected your education, if you're experienced in the care system, there are several different categories as well. But if you are likely to achieve a BBB at A level, but you have been affected by these different categories that are stated on the website, you can find there at the bottom of the slide, you can apply for a Cambridge Foundation route, which is where you go to Cambridge University for 1 year. And that year is about preparing you for an undergraduate degree at Cambridge University. So you go there for an additional year, and it's almost like an introduction. You're a full member of the college community, you have access to all of the resources, and it's almost like a bridging gap between that A-level course and a full undergraduate course. And 65% of students who go through that foundation year sorry, that was a really long one about a window being open on the top floor of the school and someone having to shut it. But yes, 65% of people who do a foundation route then go on to do an undergraduate degree at Cambridge. They're accepted onto one. So, you know, have a look at that. If you think you might qualify, that's also a really good pathway. I did actually join a webinar about this last year, and they said that if you have any of those conditions, you fit into any of those categories for qualification for that route, but you're on track to get A, you shouldn't apply, you should go down the normal route. But just something to flag, just in case that's of interest to anyone. So, next steps. Come to our event on Monday, which is with the admissions officers at Mansfield College, Oxford, and Gonville and Caius College, Cambridge, and they are our partner colleges, so we work really closely with them. And Mansfield in particular, I think, takes something like 87% state school intake, so they're doing really good work on ensuring that the state school intake is represented in Oxford as well. And if you're interested in applying and you want to ask some questions, maybe you're thinking now, oh, I want to readdress the subject I'm taking at A-level, or maybe, you know, I'm interested in doing this course, but I don't know where to start doing some summer reading, get in touch, drop me an email or ask me to give you a call back, and we can have a chat about it. I've also got plenty of reading lists available, so if you would like to start exploring some reading, get in touch and let me know. And also, there are teachers around the school who either have experience of going to Oxford or Cambridge, or who are, you know, are subject specialists. So if you want any reading or areas of interest, always use your teachers as well. And think about the advice you've been given today. It's a really daunting thing to think about making that application now. It feels like a long way away, particularly when you've just got out of your GCSE exams. But what an amazing starting point for conversations. Going to Oxford and Cambridge isn't for everyone, but, you know, talking to your families, is this something that you'd like to go for? What excites you about it? And yeah, can't wait to hear more from you. So we've got about 15 minutes left in our time slot. I want to see if there's any questions from our audience for Rosa, or for myself, but mostly for Rosa. Do feel free to put your hand up or just come off mute. Yes, Marcos.
Hi, yes. Just a question, Rosa. How did you? I don't know how it is the process to, you know, choosing the college you want to go. Is there any specific I don't know way of getting access to information, or different specific criteria to get to any specific college? I mean, how it is to choose the college you want to apply?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Yeah, I was thinking I hadn't touched on this, so it's useful. So there are like a few different factors, but I would say overall it's not super important which one you apply for in terms of like your odds of getting in. There are a few different factors which you might want to consider. So one of them is like the percentage of state school people that like the college like accepts, because like that'll give you an indication of like kind of how they prioritize applications and that kind of thing. Like I'd say that is a bit of a useful thing to look for. Yeah, another thing, the reason I chose Somerville is because it was the first women's college. So like I kind of felt like a bit of a connection to it because of that, but like that didn't materially change my experience of being there, because it's like mixed now. Yeah, another thing that you might want to look at is like the number of undergrads which the college accepts. Just because like colleges which have a lot of undergrads, like you just have like a wider pool of people to be friends with. So you might just have like a bit of a funner experience while you're there. And the one thing you might also want to look at in terms of like maybe slightly increasing your odds of getting in somewhere, is that like some colleges only accept like a really small number of small number of students for like specific subjects. So like I was actually going to apply for English and French initially, but my college, the one that I applied for, only accepted like one person for that. So like my odds probably would have been like smaller in getting into that college for that subject. In the end, I changed my mind and just applied for straight English anyway. But like that is something that you might want to look
Yeah, and that's a really good question, and something I think we didn't labour enough. You actually don't have to select a college at all. You could apply just to the university and say, I want you to select my college for me. But yeah, there are a few rules. So there's places, for example, don't apply for the prettiest building that everybody would apply for. Think about one of the colleges maybe on the outskirts, a little bit further out, or colleges that might be a little bit more modern, that people might not be sort of as attached to, and as you say, thinking about the stats and how many students they take per year. Any other questions? David, I can't believe you don't have a question. No? Okay. Well, in that case, oh, hang on. Here we go, David. Does taking a gap year change your odds?
Not that I know of. I don't know any statistics about it, but I guess like experientially, a lot of my friends took gap years. I'd say most people that I know took a gap year, actually, but I don't think it necessarily improves your odds in a way. That might just be like my circle of friends, like traveling.
I think that's a really good question, David, to ask the admissions officers on Monday, our next talk. From my experience helping people through the application process, it really depends. Now, obviously, you could be in a stronger position, hypothetically, because you're going to that interview with, I've already got the grades, I'm already ready to go. And this other thing is that it depends what you do with that summer as well. You leave school and then your application is in again in October. Lots of students find it really difficult to update their personal statement and motivate themselves to do that without teachers there. And also, you can't really take a summer off. If you're making that application, there'll be an expectation that you've taken your knowledge even further and your written work even further. So in some ways, having a gap year is hypothetically fine. I've seen quite a few students think, having done brilliant at school, that they're going to take a gap year and reapply, and then unfortunately just have started a job in the summer and ended up not having enough time to do the reading that they meant to, or something like that. So just making sure that if you're considering a gap year, that it's really, really carefully planned and thought out. Okay, any other questions? Carlos, what type of topic should you write about in your personal statement? So Carlos, am I right in thinking that you're thinking of applying for medicine? Yes. Okay, so the kind of topics you could write about in medicine. I mean, Rosa, I don't know this. Shall I take this one?
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't feel like I could answer confidently on like a personal statement for medicine. I'm sorry about that.
So I think with all medical personal statements, the biggest issue that I have year after year is I get so many students who say, I want to apply to study medicine because I want to help people. And Carlos, we've had this conversation, I think, before at school, but medicine isn't always about helping people. Medicine is about, using the knowledge that you have to assess risk, to balance risk and make decisions about a patient's well-being based on weighing things up. There's a lot of philosophy and ethics involved. If a patient has, you can operate on a patient, but they're very old and maybe they won't recover, or a patient has got, if you operate them, it's a high-risk procedure, but they may have 4 or 5 months left. You have to make difficult decisions all the time. And so I would really encourage you in any kind of medical personal statement to really get to grips with what you think medicine is. And then look at the news, look at topics that interest you. So, things that have been in the news recently, for example, we've had this great, pandemic where COVID, at first in intensive care, there was a massive crisis and lots of people were dying of COVID because they just didn't know how to treat it. And now, if you look at the statistics, the number of people who are in intensive care with COVID who survive is much higher. So why is that? Why medically is that interesting? There's been news recently that women who are described as minority ethnic or black women tend to die in labour or because of having children more so than white women. and thinking about why that is medically speaking, or why that exists in the medical service. So I would encourage you to really, the first thing to do, go out into the news, do some reading, think of something that really lights a flame that you'd like to write about, that you'd like to use as a point to do more research. Yeah, I hope, sorry, that was a very rambly answer, but does that answer your question? When taking on what do you mean at A level, or you're thinking about applying for psychology or applying for, so is it, you might apply for medicine or you might apply for psychology? Carlos, why don't you come off mute?
Yes, Miss. I was talking about A level and university degree.
So you're toying with the idea of applying for psychology?
Yeah.
Okay. The best advice that I can give is to do some reading and to get some work experience, which has been so difficult for students over the last couple of years because everywhere's been closed. But, you know, try and get some experience and see if you like it or not, I suppose. But read about both. I mean, there's lots of crossover between the two. You could, for example, start reading about something like psychiatry, or looking at, or reading about neurosurgery. There's a really great book by Henry Marsh called Do No Harm, which is just brilliant, and it's all about a very famous neurosurgeon, and there's very graphic descriptions of very complicated operations that he's doing, and the morals and ethics of what he's doing and how he balances stuff in his brain. That's a really good starting point, because then you're not kind of ruling either out. You're sort of in a choice between the two, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you, Miss.
Okay, and any other final questions from Ollie or Mohammed? Okay, in that case, I will draw our fourth A level versus EPQ. I think, David, this is definitely that's a question for our admissions officers on Monday. Keep hold of that, because I know that's been on your mind a lot. Keep hold of that question. Let's ask our admissions officers, because there's a worry about giving advice that then they, you know, you want to hear that straight from the horse's mouth about what they think as well. So wait to ask Sarah and Gwyneth on Monday. Rosa, thank you so much for your time and for helping us out. As always, it's been so lovely to talk to you and hear about your experiences. Yeah, thank you very much.
No worries. Yeah, it was really nice to meet everyone that came. Thanks for coming. And yeah, nice to see you, Miss Potter. Thanks for putting it on.
No problem. And yeah, I hope that's started maybe inspiring some people. And see you all on Monday at our next event, and spread the word. Thank you very much for joining us. Well, it's kind of nice to be back on Microsoft Teams.
Was it? Did
yeah,
you
really nice. Oscar, are you hanging around because you've... No, he's gone. Okay, I was going to say, did he have a question? Rosa, thanks so much. We've kept it within an hour. Look at us.
It's fantastic. Yeah, I hope. Yeah, I hope I didn't overstep the mark in any of the answering any of the like admission stuff, since you're going to have the people on Monday.
No, not at all.
Okay, cool. I was thinking when you about like the thing about like offering advice, because for instance, like the applying for different colleges thing, I was always taught that it didn't make a massive difference, but then maybe it does. Like, I don't know.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I'm just going to stop recording. But when